Welcome to Storytelling. This week's guest helps sensitive, soul-led visionaries stop hiding and feeling safe being fully seen in the powerful work they do. With her unique, unmuted method, she blends hypnosis, somatic tools, nervous system regulation, and energy medicine to help leaders overcome fear, perfectionism, and overwhelm so they can fully share their gifts with the world. Please welcome Lyn Delmastro-Thomson.
Hello, Lyn, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Lyn, you share that visibility can feel dangerous for sensitive people. What's really happening in the nervous system when we freeze up?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think what's really happening when we freeze up is that our body is going into this pattern, usually dating back to childhood. And it's a part of us that just doesn't feel safe being seen. So we literally go into the same response as the fight or flight response triggered if a wild tiger was chasing us down. When we go into that response, our body either freezes up, which is very common for sensitive people, or you go into a flight response sometimes where you're like, okay, I'm going to do everything else on my to-do list except the thing that I need to do. I'm going to clean my kitchen. I'm going to do the laundry. I'm going to do all of the things as a way of, again, fleeing from the situation.
So what examples can you give? Because you mentioned that it's probably a pattern that we've learned in childhood because we don't feel safe and seen. So what examples can you provide there?
Yeah, I'd love to actually share a little bit of my own story because I think it illuminates this point for sure. I want to take you back to childhood for me, or teenage years, when I was hiding in plain sight. And this wasn't me as an adult again in a business. This was me in my 10th grade history class. I'm setting the scene here for everybody. I was sitting in my desk seat. I was wearing this oversized hoodie, and the room was like 80 degrees warm. So it was pretty hot to be wearing this hoodie pulled up over my head. And I'm like slouched down in my seat. I'm trying to disappear, basically. And I was hoping I wasn't going to be called on. And it wasn't because I didn't know the answer. I did usually know the answer to the teacher's questions. But for me, it had to do with the fact that if I spoke up, there were these boys that were on the debate team in my history class, and they loved to twist anybody's words into this argument. And to me and my sensitive self at that point, it felt like this battle. So I felt like I was literally trying to hide from people who were going to attack me. And my heart would start to race, my throat would close up, my body just wanted to slide down as far in the chair as possible. And that was really, for me, a long-term survival strategy in childhood, not to speak too loudly, not to stand out too much. It's don't be a target, right? Don't be bright and shiny, just be invisible. And it didn't really start for me when I was in 10th grade history class. It started a lot earlier because I was bullied from early elementary school on. I was bullied because I was a girl who was smart. I wasn't the same religion as a lot of people in the same area where I lived. So I was like different, right? I didn't fit in the way that I was, quote unquote, supposed to, according to my peers. And so for me, that was about learning how to shrink. And I carried that forward into adulthood. It was like that personality pattern of shrinking and hiding became my go-to when I became an adult, and especially when I started to have a business and try to put myself out there and market myself. And I'd love to give a few examples of what that looked like. So anytime I had to go to a networking event and we'd go around the room and everybody would have their 30 seconds, For me, that was as terrifying as standing on a stage and speaking to a group, even if there were 10 people in the room. Each person that would go around the circle and it was closer to me, I was, oh no, it's almost my turn. Oh no, it's almost my turn. What am I going to say? And I would just hide everything about what I did. I was doing energy work, and yet I was trying to hide that anything was woo. I was trying to make everything sound perfectly scientific, professional. And that was my go-to, informed by my childhood.
I think that's really interesting because some people say that they're afraid of public speaking, for example. And often we just think it's an anxiety of just going on stage, but we don't actually realize that there's probably a pattern of trauma behind that as well. How can someone tell if they're experiencing a trauma response versus stage fright? And what is the difference between the two?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I would guess that actually a lot of stage fright really is a trauma response. Obviously, I haven't talked to every human on the face of the earth, and I don't know all of their backstories, but just feeling into that and thinking about it, I think a lot of stage fright probably does come from these visibility wounds that we have, these trauma responses of not really feeling safe putting ourselves out there, not really feeling safe being seen. So that's a really interesting question. And I think maybe it's a question too for the individual. If you feel like you have stage fright, do you have things in your past that make it feel like it's not safe to show up? You don't want to be too big, too loud, too shiny. Most of my clients, the things that I hear, they had a parent who didn't accept them for who they were as a kid. That's another really common trauma pattern. A parent who was like, you're not good enough. A parent who was like an alcoholic parent or a narcissistic parent. And so then they learned how to just hide as like a general survival response because that person was volatile and unstable for them. Think back maybe into your past. Are there things that would have made you want to hide? And then is that therefore showing up as stage fright? I think maybe there's some people who are like, I just have no desire to get on a stage, and that might be a different thing.
You gave really good examples of your own personal experience and how you learned to shrink and why it was necessary for you to do that in order to feel safe. What does it take to unlearn those patterns?
I think for me, what it takes is really meeting ourselves in the moment. And maybe I'll share a little bit of a story of the moment, one of the key moments that I met myself in that as an example here. So about 8 years ago, I was at this women's event, this conference, and there were probably about 100 women in the room. And this was at the point I was still in my shrinking, not feeling safe. And I had this kind of aha moment when I was listening to somebody speak or just through the whole experience of this weekend. And I realized that the reason I was struggling in business wasn't because I had a crappy website or the wrong offer or I was charging the wrong thing. I realized my real block was that I was hiding. I was hiding who I was. So there was this moment, my turning point moment was this, the organizer of the event said, would anybody like a few minutes to come up on the stage and share with people in the room? And part of me was like, where's the bathroom? I'm going to go lock myself in the bathroom. That sounds scary. And yet some part of me was like, no, this is a safe space. I'm going to raise my hand. I'm going to get up on the stage. And so I did. I walked up to the stage, and for me, something clicked. And this is what I've taken forward and developed into my method is I met myself in that moment, and I used a bunch of nervous system tools, simply in the beginning, just some breath work that I had been teaching people in a different context. I was working with people with stress management. I was working with people to help them with pain. And I dropped into this in the moment, and I'm like, oh, take some deep breaths. Oh, feel your feet on the floor. And then I also just tapped into this part of me who had performed in a different way. Like I'd been a dancer through my childhood and into adulthood, and performing in that way always had felt actually really safe and empowering for me. So it's like I dropped into those things, I met myself in the moment, and I was able to stand up on that stage and share, even though I knew in that moment I was scared. I was like, I know my voice is going to get all wobbly and crack and shake, because that's what used to happen. I used to talk and my voice would get all like when I would speak. And it was so empowering when I got up there. By the end, I just thought to myself, you know what? I could do this again. I could actually do this again. It wasn't as terrifying as I thought it was, because I actually found a way to meet my nervous system basically in that moment.
I think it's interesting you said you managed to meet your nervous system in that moment. How did you know to recreate that moment again for another time in the future?
I think afterwards, I thought about what made that so different. What made that different from me just introducing myself at a networking event where that had felt terrifying. In those moments before, I had just frozen, right? I locked down, I stopped breathing basically. Yes, I was breathing, but I was very tensed up. And in this moment, it was just this instinct happened, and I took some breaths. And then afterwards, I thought, what made that different? And I think the other thing that made it different too was because of that courage, I received so much support from the women in the room. It was almost this healing experience too. For the little girl who had been bullied and rejected, all these women coming up to me and saying, wow, what you said actually was really powerful and it really meant something to me. And it was like, oh, so what I said actually had value, instead of I'm going to be attacked for what I said.
And you also work with a lot of individuals who are in leadership positions who often default to self-sacrifice or overgiving. Why is this such a common pattern, and how can listeners begin to shift in that area as well?
Yeah, we're taught to put everybody else first. Most women that I talk to in life, right? Or it's like, what do you need? What does my husband need? What do the kids need? What does my family need? What do my friends need? And we forget really what we need. That's the bottom of the list. And yet, that's really not very healthy for us to constantly put ourselves at the bottom of that list, because that's our energy, our time. We're not valuing ourselves. Our health suffers. I spent a lot of years working with people on their health. And I think that's one of the connections I saw, was people struggling with their health because they're not putting themselves first.
And how do we put ourselves first without feeling selfish? Because that's really what it is. People feel selfish if they put themselves first. They feel as though they have to take care of family, friends, or anyone else, and then put themselves last on the list.
Yeah, I think putting ourselves first, it's like changing our mindset and changing our beliefs about that, because that goes back to what we learned in the first 7 years of our lives. So we probably received certain messages verbally from our caregivers, our mother, our grandmother, other people, like, don't be selfish, put other people first. And we also just learned it from observing. What did your mother do? What did other women around you do? And then you just were conditioned into that. Oh, okay, this is what I should do. So to change it, we really actually have to work more at a deep level, a deep subconscious level, because that's where that programming went in to us as a young child. In the first 7 years, they say we walk around basically almost in a hypnotic state. We don't have that filter of our conscious critical mind to be like, does that actually make sense? Is that logical? It's just, oh, this is how the world works. So to change how the world works, we actually have to reprogram at that subconscious level and clear out those beliefs of, I'm selfish if I put myself first. It's wrong. It's bad. Whatever it is for the individual.
And how do we unprogram ourselves? If someone's listening and they think, oh yeah, I recognize those patterns, I recognize it myself in everything that we've just been discussing, what are the first steps they can do to get out of that pattern?
I think, what you can do for yourself is noticing those patterns, like observing, okay, those are the beliefs, those are the thoughts and the conditionings I have. You can write out for yourself some new beliefs. If you think it's selfish to put myself first, maybe create a reframe for that of everyone in my life benefits when I take care of myself. That's one of the ones I like to go to. It speaks to both things. When I take care of myself, I thrive and other people thrive. But to really work truly at that subconscious level, we actually have to use tools that aren't really things you can completely do on your own. You have to use something like hypnosis or other modalities that get into that subconscious mind. And that's why I say to people sometimes, if you've tried like affirmations and you're journaling and you're doing all these great things and it's not sticking, it's probably because it's not going into your subconscious mind. And your conscious mind is just not the place that you need to address those beliefs or those thoughts.
And what changes have you personally experienced having recognized your own patterns and wanting to change them?
I think like one of my patterns has always just been the kind of keeping small, like not saying what I really think. And as I've worked through that, as I've healed parts of me that thought it wasn't safe to have an opinion, it wasn't safe to be too bold, now I speak pretty straightforwardly to people what I think, not harshly and coming at someone to hurt them, but it's also not coming from that place of I'm going to sugarcoat things to please you. If I don't like something, if it doesn't work for me, I'm much more confident to just be like, you know what, that's not really going to work for me. Thank you for thinking of me, but I'm not really available for that.
Mm-hmm. So it's basically having the confidence to set your boundaries. And I think it's just recognizing what your personal values are.
Yeah. And then feeling like it's not bad or wrong, or if somebody doesn't like it, like that doesn't necessarily mean I did something wrong or bad. It's maybe we're just not compatible in a certain sense in that area. Maybe that person needs a different friend, a different support for them, but I'm not going to sacrifice myself and be, oh, yeah, I'm available for you 24/7 or whatever it is that somebody's asking for that just doesn't work for me.
What would you say is the one key thing that you would want someone listening to take away from our conversation?
I would say it all starts deep in our subconscious mind and in our nervous system. How we operate in life, whether that's showing up, being visible in our work, in our relationships, in how we show up for ourselves, that all is wired into us at a pretty young age. But just because it's set in there, it's not like a sentence of doom, right? Like we can change things. We can learn ways to regulate our nervous system, ways to change our mindset, change our beliefs, and move forward. Like it's really possible for us to change.
I just want to bring up one last thing, because several times you've mentioned regulating the nervous system. What does that look like? Can you just expand on that a bit more?
Yeah. So there are so many different tools, so many different practices that can help take our body out of that fight or flight state. One of the simplest ones is just focusing on deep breathing, because that is one of the ways that it's free. We don't need any special tools or training. If you simply do something like inhale for a count of 4 and exhale for a count of 6 for a few minutes, that is actually just going to physiologically change what's happening in your body. It's just science, basically, of what's going to happen. And there's so many other practices and tools that I have in my toolbox, things that I love to share with people that are all about a minute, 2 minutes long, sometimes We can do deeper practices too, but there's things that can just switch us very quickly out of thinking, okay, I'm going to run and hide, or I'm going to fight and defend myself, to I actually am safe and I can just be present in this moment, rather than, again, nervous system thinking there's a wild tiger hiding in the bushes.
No, I thank you very much for that. Lyn, you've given us lots of food for thought. And I just want to thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
If you would like further details about Lyn, then please follow links in the show notes.